Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have Pluto and Libra, this is a generation that comprises most of Generation X. I'm Generation X, but the first year of it, 1965, and Generation X, according to Wikipedia, ended in the early 80s. That's not very exact, but I'm trying to remember when Generation Y or the millennials began, and I think a lot of times they say like 1983. So let's say that Generation X ended in 82. And so there's going to be a couple of early Generation Y people, millennials, that fit into this as well. But most of you are going to be Generation X. And as somebody who isn't part of Pluto and Libra, but grew up in the 1970s as a kid, I can attest to what this is all about. We know that Libra is about relationships. So Pluto can act as a transformation agent, albeit quite a harsh one. And this period was when we saw a great uptick in divorce. If you've ever watched an old movie from, I don't know, the 40s or 50s even, but even before that, I think even like in the 30s. And I'm trying to think if there was like some movie with Joan Crawford or something where they had like a divorced character, a woman who's divorced, and it's so taboo. I don't even know if I can think of a movie like that. But divorce was not something that was common. Of course, it existed. And I would say that, during the 60s, we had a lot of social upheaval and things became, well, you could say things unraveled. And we also had a generation of Neptune and Libra. This is the flower child generation, starting in 1943 and ending in 1957. Now, I will say that those who are born in 1957, they would have just been 10 during the Summer of Love. So I I wouldn't really say that they embodied the full brunt of what that 60s generation represented, but certainly they became adolescents in the early 70s, and they would have experienced some of that illusion and also disillusionment, because that's part and parcel with any illusion, that then the illusion gets shattered. That came from that generation as it pertained to love. Now, something that was happening alongside of this, starting in 1968, we had Uranus in Libra, and that was from 1968 until 1975. Uranus is the disruptor. Uranus is the change agent, but it comes on very suddenly, and it can be quite chaotic as a result of that. It's also a shorter transit. I don't know if they consider Uranus to be a generational planet, because a generation means that, it's one chunk of time after which you can reproduce. So 15 years for Neptune and Pluto is a lot different than 7 years for Uranus. So I would say it's definitely an outer planet, but it's not really it's a subgenerational influence. And that specific time frame between 1968 and 1975 definitely might have been where there were uh, maybe sudden breakups, the free love that we associate with Aquarian ideals is certainly present with that, and Neptune going along with that for um, those some of those years as well. In Scorpio, that um, speaks about the illusion of sex. And I haven't done that video yet, so I'm going to hold off on speaking more about that. But suffice it to say, when we talk about Pluto, we have to talk about sex as well. And I didn't see sex mentioned in what I read, so that's very interesting. I'm going to definitely delve into that. And so the harsh realities of the limitations of human romantic relationships may have been front and center here. But I think, when we think of Pluto, we think of a cleansing. And I think the cleansing has to come about by the Libra tendency to gloss over some of the more shadow aspects of things. All things in life, not just about love, anything that is disturbing or otherwise not pleasant. But in this specific case, we're talking about shattering that or unearthing that and forcing people to deal with relationships in a much more realistic way and purging those, I would call it illusions, even though it's more about avoidance, I think, when it comes to Libra. Libra, are the scales, and the scales have to be balanced. And when a Libra person or people with planets in Libra just want to tilt it one way that is warm and fuzzy, then that's still an imbalance. That's why the shadow self has to be acknowledged and integrated. Now, another thing that I didn't see mentioned, which I really think is important, is about peace, because Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is about harmony. And this is another thing with the Neptune in Libra, the peaceniks, against the Vietnam War. Well, in 1970, right before Pluto in Libra kicked off, we had Kent State in the United States. And that tore the heart out of the peace movement. I'm convinced of it because, protesting became deadly. And of course, that wasn't the first time that something happened, but it was just so in your face that, there are sometimes these seminal events that seem to just collapse movements. And so 1971, the Vietnam War was still raging, but then there was the wind down in, towards the mid 70s. And I feel like that Pluto spoke of the dark side of everything that seems so placid on the surface. This was when John Lennon was assassinated in 1980 during this transit, and he was a sun in Libra. So Pluto was, in his sun sign. So maybe we could say that that was a dangerous period for him, especially as a prominent person, because I can guarantee you that there are plenty of people out here that don't believe the official story of who killed him. And all of the things that seem that they are, when we seem that we have peace, that there really are things going on beneath the surface that are anything but. So, we talk about shadow governments, coups, There was a coup in Chile in 1973 on September 11th, of course. I'm just saying. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But they're, the kind of things that take place covertly rather than overtly. But on the surface, it might seem like something else. So getting back to the Libra and talking about what that represents. Another thing is about beauty and Pluto. Pluto wants to transform. Pluto is obsessed. Another thing I didn't see is about plastic surgery. I'm trying to think, like, if somebody's born in 1984, then they're close to 40 at the youngest. Because, plastic surgery is also happening with a lot of younger people. I mean, it's become even more mainstream these days, but I would say that was the first generation that really encountered these kinds of things, or maybe engaged in a larger number, because, remember that the people who are trying to control us, I don't want to say that they are controlling us because we have to accept responsibility, but who are trying to, they may know very well about these types of transits and they are trying to play into it as well. And we have seen the rise in women, especially, but now men have been doing so as well, trying to perfect their looks. And this Generation X was the generation where this became something that was not unusual at all. We've had makeup and certainly before this year, but with Pluto, it's like an obsession, and it can also be something that when we talk about transforming, it's really doing so in a dramatic fashion. And but that has a dark side, so the dark side of beauty, we could say. And by the way, because I have spoken out about body dysmorphia and things like that, and I got some comments about, or I don't know, when I talk about plastic surgery and things like that. This is not to shame anybody. I have my own personal opinions on plastic surgery, which I share only to give food for thought. But it isn't about judging anybody. It's just about bringing it out in the open, because certainly people who do become obsessed, they can go overboard. They can put their health at risk, and they can end up doing exactly the opposite of what they wanted to do, which was enhance their beauty. So with Pluto, there's the dark side of beauty, and when I say dark side, I think also of exploitation, of trying to convince people that they are inadequate unless they undergo major transformation in whatever way that entails. And the interesting juxtaposition between that and growing up and seeing your parents split up is not lost on me, because I think that sometimes people internalize this idea of, and I think girls, if they see their mothers getting left by their husbands, they may say, well, if only I, were pretty enough or sexy enough, then my husband will never leave me, which is a pretty simplistic thing, but, children think things at a very basic level. And so that becomes like when, a girl gets older, then she may, if she's in a relationship with a man. She may try to please him through even how she looks and become what he wants her to become, or what she thinks he wants her to become. We can't blame men for what we as women do, you know. Even if they make comments, you still are, you still have to take responsibility whether you're going to allow somebody else to dictate what you do with your body in that way. So I just find that very interesting, because I wouldn't be surprised if that played into it. Some kids, when their parents get divorced, they breathe a sigh of relief. I remember when my parents got divorced, I was happy because I knew that it was going to end a certain type of, emotional chaos in the household. But, sometimes that gets redirected. So just remember that. It doesn't always end, it just changes form. But there's always, so I never had that illusion, but some people do. Some people really think that their parents have a good relationship, and when they split up, it freaks them out. So being able to transform one's illusions about what exactly a relationship can do can be quite powerful if the person is willing to do it. So that's why Pluto is like this. I was going to say a bag of dynamite, but that doesn't sound like it has a positive side to it. It's something that is it's like a powerful tool that's like when we say the phrase double-edged sword, is that how you say it? Where it can do something positive, but it can also destroy. So the bottom line is that for this generation, the key is not to become jaded, because you may have experienced the trauma, because Pluto can be trauma, of seeing your parents' love get destroyed when really it was being transformed, but you might have perceived it that way, or it might have shown up in a very chaotic kind of way, and yet it has this healing effect if you allow it to, because you're able to take that information. Life is all about information, and empower yourself about what kind of relationships do you want to cultivate. And I I thought maybe I misspoke and said relationships in the plural, and I really wanted to mention romantic relationships. But really, the seventh house that Libra rules is one on one relationships. And really, relationships can be any relationship you have with a person where it's just you and them. So it has a greater intimacy as a result. And what's interesting is, Pluto is one of the rulers along with Mars of Scorpio. And Libra is a sign that sometimes I think tends to be quite superficial if it's just left to its own devices. And, the injection of Pluto into this can really make a person want relationships that are in depth. But sometimes you have to go through the fire to get there. It's not always going to be dropped in your lap. And, they say kissing a bunch of frogs before you get your prince or your princess. And that really means that you have to bring your highest version of yourself to relationships and be willing to be transformed, because I'm going to tell you something, as somebody who just celebrated 40 years with the same person, this is the kind of thing that is not for the faint of heart sometimes. If you're doing it right. And maybe there are some really wonderful relationships where everything runs smoothly and they never fight. They never have any kind of disagreement. Wow, that's just great if you're able to have that. But I think for many of us, because we're bringing our own trauma to relationships, that your pain body meets their pain body and sparks fly as a result. And if you hang in there, which means if you're willing to um, face your own demons that are mirrored by that other person, you may come out the other side in a positive way. But you know, that's the thing about this era, is the divorce became so um, you know, shamed. What's the term? It just became something that was not considered taboo anymore. That it's like, okay, well, we can always get divorced, or if you don't marry to begin with, I can always move out and no biggie. Um, and that can keep the person kind of like refusing to really delve into things big time, but just keeping everything on the surface. So it is kind of interesting how that we do have free will, and we can choose what type of relationship we want. But Pluto and Libra guarantees that you will probably be met with relationships that are very transformative for you if you are willing to engage at the deepest level, that is. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.